Mourning is the price we pay for having the courage to love others. Even in grief, we know that the wonder of human life is too complex and too magnificent to be memorialized in endless pain. The gifts of spirit our loved ones gave us cannot be measured or weighed, nor can they be lost or even tarnished by time. Even in our darkest hours, we know that some of their light and their warmth will always be with us, bringing comfort and courage, and in the fullness of time, healing and peace. Good afternoon. My name is Meir Bargeron, and I am the rabbi at Congregation Achduth V'Shalom. We gather today in great sadness to honor the life of Doris Fogel, and we welcome those of you who are joining us via live stream. Together in this moment, those of us in the sanctuary and those of us wherever we are a united, sacred community. We offer comfort to Doris's children, Art, Dan, Deborah, and Susie, Debbie, and Andrew, and to her grandchildren, Annie, Jacob, Lucy, Eleanor, Emily, Samuel, Rebecca, and Jonathan. And in our thoughts today, of course, is Doris's beloved Sam, husband, father, and grandfather. And we are joined here today by Rabbi Bruce Elder, Doris's rabbi and the family's rabbi, who was with Doris and her children and grandchildren through her journey and quite a bit of time before that. And it is an honor to welcome you to this Bima, Rabbi.
So our tradition says that from the point of death to the point of burial, that a meta, one who has died, should not be left alone. And a tradition is when we're sitting with someone, we're supposed to read Psalms. I had the honor of being able to sit here for about an hour before y'all got here. And I wanted to read Psalms, but I could imagine me trying to do that and Doris shaking her head and thinking a few things. So I did what I felt would honor her best. And instead of reading from the Psalms of our tradition, I read poetry of the Holocaust. So to me, those are the Psalms of Doris. And so I thought it would be best to start our time together, not with a psalm from our collective tradition, but a psalm from our collective tradition. It's a poem called The Creed of a Holocaust Survivor by Alexander Kimmel. And I just mention this, as we'll learn later, because I think it speaks to Doris's last few breaths of what she hoped for, of what she evolved into, of what she represents. It reads, I do believe with all my heart in the natural goodness of humanity. Despite the blood and destruction brought by one man trying to be God, in the goodness of humanity, I do believe. I do believe with all my heart that God gave humanity the blessing and the curse. Humanity can select the curse of envy, hatred, and prejudice, or the blessing of love, harmony, and beauty. Despite the painful curses of the past and the blessing of the Creator, I do believe. I do believe with all my heart that God created a beautiful world. Sun, trees, flowers, and bees, and the best way to serve God is to enjoy the fruits of God's labor of love. Despite the painful memories of the past, in the joyful celebration of life, I do believe. I do believe with all my heart that God has created humanity in God's own image, and killing of any person is like the killing of the divine. despite massacres, cleansings, fanatics, cruelty, in the love and compassion of the Creator, I do believe. I do believe with all my heart that that day will come when humanity will conquer this destructive urge and learn how to live in harmony with nature and with each other. When all the preachers of hate will be silenced and humanity will become each other's keeper, when humanity will stop killing one another in the name of God, a nation will not lift weapons against another nation. When it will be, I do not know. But despite all the signs to the contrary, in the dawn of a better world, I do believe.
I'll share a reading from Kohelet, also called Ecclesiastes. There is a time for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooting the planted, a time for destroying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping, and a time for laughing, a time for wailing, and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones, and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing, and a time for refraining from embraces, a time for seeking, and a time for losing, a time for keeping, and a time for discarding, a time for tearing, and a time for sowing, a time for silence, and a time for speaking, a time for loving, and a time for hating, a time for war, and a time for peace. The biblical psalmist captures our yearning for comfort when we face the death of a loved one and whenever we inevitably consider our own death. Let us read together in the service leaflet the words of Psalm 23. Please join me. A song of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He causes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even as I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You set a table before me in the presence of my adversaries. You anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord for the length of my days.
It's an honor to be here with all of you, to be here for Doris, with Doris. I've been hearing about this place for a really long time. Not just the 10 years that Doris has been in Chicago, but for the 25 years I've been with the family. As I was telling Dan beforehand, I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio. I kind of feel like I'm at home. But being here for Doris, in this place that in so many ways made Doris, and that Doris helped make, that even though she left here 10 years ago, you all know that she never left here. And so it's a real honor to be here, just to share about her a little bit. My last conversation with her was Tuesday. Frankly, I didn't think we'd be here this quickly, but we knew it was inevitable. And after she and I kidded about a few things, as I've shared with the family and he's shared with me, that she told me, the first thing she told me was that she put a seating chart together for this. She told me she was ready. And for Doris, that's a big deal. Because as we all know, those of us who knew her, Doris loved life passionately and fought passionately for every honest breath she could take. And if she felt she could take more, she would still be breathing. And yet the inevitability of her prognosis, it was a big decision for her to come off the medication and to say enough. Doris and I had quite a connection, as I'm sure she had with many of you. I, the son of a Holocaust survivor, it's probably one of the reasons why I've had so much affinity for all of you. But she used to say that we had an understanding. I'm sure she said this to everyone, but she made me feel really special when she said it. We had this special connection where there are certain things that we could say in which we knew what we meant, and that there was plenty that we didn't have to say because we knew already what we meant. To be able to share in the years of family moments with her and with you, it was an honor to be let into that life. As challenging and as feisty and as opinionated as sometimes it was, as it always was. But to be led into a soul that was so complicated and loving and lovely and passionate and struggling. I realized that she was the last living Holocaust survivor that I knew. One of the few remaining. Which means for all that we've heard about the generations to come that have to pick up the mantle, that time is here. And so what better way to understand the legacy that Doris has left us? Not through my words, but through her legacy. Through a few of her children who speak, and through one of her children and a couple of her grandchildren that speak for the entire family, and to some extent, I hope, for all of us, as we get that taste one more time of what she meant to the world and what it means to be her survival. I call upon Dan.
Good afternoon. I'm Dan Fogel, Doris's middle child, and I'm here to speak today on behalf of my older brother Art and my sister Debbie, and for my children too. I really love those stained glass windows, and like nearly every kid who grew up in this room, I loved sneaking around behind these choir curtains. And make no mistake, I did grow up in this room. I gave my bar mitzvah devar Torah at that podium over there. We're here today to celebrate our mother, Doris Fogel, and to tell her story and stories about her. I shared the things I planned to tell you with my mom, and I can assure you that if she could have been here to hear us talk about her and make any necessary corrections, she would have. We talked about this a lot, and I've never known a person who wanted to be at their own funeral more than my mother did. I once heard somebody say that every Jew's story is the story of the Jewish people. This was never truer than with the story of our mom. The short version: she escaped the Nazis as a child, lived her middle school years in a ghetto in China, her high school years as a bullied immigrant in Peoria, her young adult years as an aspiring career woman in Chicago, her middle age as a loving and devoted mother, wife, and manager of my father's office here in Fort Wayne, and her golden years in a new career as executive director of the Fort Wayne Jewish Federation, and her final decade as a doting grandmother and museum docent at the Illinois Holocaust and Education Center in a suburb of her beloved Chicago. Our mother first walked into this sanctuary in 1961. Her journey to this beautiful room was far different than most of us took today. Some of you took US 30. Doris Marie Fogel was born May 3rd, 1934 in Berlin, Germany, to loving parents Alphonse and Edith Warshawski. She was born into a middle-class Germany that bears more than a passing resemblance to the world we now occupy. Many Jews in Germany at that time were living assimilated lives with professional careers and carefree trips to markets, theaters, parks, and other public spaces. But that backdrop was short-lived for the Jews of Europe, and our mother in particular. In all the tellings of my mother's life, the death of her father, my grandfather Alphonse, in 1935, when she was barely 2 years old, is posted as a footnote to her life. In reality, though, I think it's worth noting that she grew up without a father. There is no question that her mother doted on her. There's so much evidence in words and photographs to support the love my grandmother, Edith, for whom my daughter Ellie and Debbie's daughter Emily were named. She loved my mom fiercely and fiercely protected her. The death of our grandfather, our mother's father, likely emboldened our grandmother and strengthened her. Her resolve to preserve this very small family of 2 people is at least half the reason I'm standing here today. On the night of November 9th, 1938, the German Nazi Party, along with members of the Hitler Youth and many German citizens, yes, many German citizens who hadn't previously identified as Nazis, carried out Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. What was Kristallnacht? I grabbed this definition online. Sorry for the history lesson. The euphemistic name Kristallnacht, literally Crystal Night, comes from the shards of broken glass that littered the streets after the windows of Jewish-owned stores, buildings, and synagogues were smashed. The Illinois Holocaust and Education Center goes even further with its definition and carries it beyond the Wikipedia definition, which kind of makes Kristallnacht sound like aggressive vandalism, and states, the German government instigated a government-sponsored terror campaign against Jewish businesses, synagogues, and people in Germany. They annexed Austria and other parts of Eastern Europe. Thousands of Jewish men were arrested and sent to concentration camps amid the violence. Kristallnacht was a pogrom, and it was a big screaming alarm that it was time to get out of Germany. But here's the thing we know and have known for 70 years. That's that not every Jew in Europe understood the warning signs of the Nazi campaign of terror on that November night. Some, I imagine, thought it was an isolated event. Others likely thought it would blow over and they could go back to living their comfortable lives. If 10 local churches had their windows broken tonight and fires were set and a bunch of adult men were dragged away, what would you do? Could you leave your home, pack the few belongings that you could carry, and board a ship headed to a new life you couldn't imagine and sail to an unknown destination? These were the very questions our grandmother, a grieving single mother, faced as Nazis entered the first floor of their 2-story building and took away the men living in the building. Our mom told this story so many times to likely thousands of classes of school children, and yet the very thought of it, recognizing your life is in danger, that the life of your only child is in danger, and taking what little you can and leaving the only country you've ever known is almost impossible to imagine. Let that sink in. That decision, those terrifying moments are the origin story of our mom, my brother, my sister, and me, and all our children, Doris's beloved grandchildren. My grandmother, Edith Warshawski, said she wanted to live, and she wanted our mom to live. And so she made the decision to leave Germany. If you followed our mom's story, You know that a couple years ago, she was approached by a film producer to make a virtual reality movie about her life, about her escape from Germany to Shanghai, China. If you get the chance, and this is the advertisement, if you get the chance travel to Chicago, please go to the Illinois Holocaust Museum and watch our mother's story unfold before your tear-soaked eyes. It's narrated by her mom, and I plan to go listen to her tell her story a few more times. When Debbie and I were kids, our mom spoke very little about her childhood. I do remember that learning she'd lived in China for 8 years, but until she was ready to talk about it, we didn't know the details. Most people have heard of or seen the movie Schindler's List, and I mention it for two reasons. First, it was after that film came out when many Holocaust survivors began publicly telling their stories. I marked that as the point when our mother stopped just alluding to a cramped apartment in Shanghai or food she would never eat, like wild rice and sweet potatoes. After she started telling her story, she never stopped. She went to classrooms all over Indiana and then all over the United States to share her story and her message of survival and remembrance. The other part of the movie, I need another Kleenex. The other part of the movie that stands out for me is the final scene in the movie, which I watched again the other night on YouTube, and I apologize for the spoiler alert. When the Jews Oskar Schindler saved walked respectfully past his grave, and the words that scroll across the screen say that the descendants of the Schindler Jews numbered 6,000, and that movie came out in 1994. I find that particularly poignant because my mother left Germany as an only child with her mother and left us this week with 3 children and 8 grandchildren. The thing she lost to the Holocaust was her family. In her last days, she reflected on how proud she was of her 3 children. Really, everyone I've talked to recently that knew my mom told me she said this all the time. And how much she loved and was proud of and absolutely beamed at her grandchildren and her almost grandchild-in-law. There's a video on the Illinois Holocaust Museum website that was filmed after a showing of her movie where most of her grandchildren, who are in this room today, gathered around and talk about her and her life that she had created for them. I teared up just writing that sentence, and I really encourage you to watch that video. But enough about the heavy stuff. Let's talk a little bit about my mom and the life she lived, if I can transition that way. To our mom, there were 2 kinds of people, the people she liked and everyone else. If our mom liked you, you knew because she told you all the time, and actually told other people, how much your friendship meant to her. If she didn't like you, well, she made that pretty clear too. On the night after she died, we gathered at my brother Art's house for dinner in preparation for this day, and I asked everyone to tell stories about my mom, essentially stealing the rabbi's job. And here's what everyone told me. And what I want to start with is the many caregivers she had over the last few months of her life. We were lucky enough to find several women who were not only dedicated to keeping my mom comfortable, keeping her water glass full, making sure she was in front of the TV at precisely 3:30 when Jeopardy started. We, unbeknownst to ourselves, found women who would instantly bond with our mom, except the woman she made cry who quit, which was very on brand for Doris, and do her bidding by running to gas stations to buy her lottery tickets or other assorted errands that we had not sanctioned. I want to make special mention of one of those caregivers, my sister Debbie. She tirelessly coordinated my mom's care. She found caregivers and kept the largest spreadsheet you've ever seen, though neither Art nor I have ever opened the spreadsheet. So I assume it's large. When we needed more people, Debbie found them. When we couldn't find a caregiver, Debbie stepped in and delivered care to my mom. And then in a final twist, she roped me into delivering care and then stood back and let my mom and I rediscover parts of our relationship that had either been dormant for years or, to my surprise, were newly discovered. Debbie, wherever you are, I can't see. We couldn't have gotten to this moment without you. I love you. And Mom was so worried about you and how you would be today and forever after. Know that Art and I will always be there for you. I mentioned lottery tickets, and those were just some of the printed cardboard that she loved. Doris Fogel was a card shark. She loved to play canasta with her girlfriends. When we were kids, that meant bowls of bridge mix and swirling smoke of cigarettes in our living room. And as recently as last week, she had a game at her house. Winner that she was, she grumbled over the $2 that she lost in the last game she ever played. Recently, she taught grandson Jake and his fiancée Maddie how to play gin. When Maddie quickly took to the game and was beating Mom, Doris insisted that gin might be just a two-person game that she should play with just Jake. She loved to send greeting cards for every occasion. She had loaded up on them during a stint working at the Hallmark store. She somehow found the cards that were specialized for every person, the "You are a special son" or "Why is a daughter-in-law so special" card that seemed cheesy, but she really meant it, and she loved watching you open it and read the card. Doris Fogel loved sweets. As kids, we had a giant bucket of candy that sat out in the open. There were special treats that were just Mom's that she hid in the living room, but we always found the boxes of chocolates she thought she had cleverly hidden. Except for the last box she had hidden in her apartment before she died, and one of the caregivers found it. She also had the broadest definition of breakfast food ever. It included Sara Lee pound cake and coffee cakes and Murphy's Donuts. Does anyone remember those when that was a thing? More recently, there was a candy dish stationed every 5 feet in her apartment that fortified her cravings. The ironic twist of her final illness, the sad ironic twist really, was that she became a type 1 diabetic, and we as her kids found ourselves having to say no to her in a way she never said to us when it came to sweets. Our mom loved shopping and coordinated her outfits. She had more clothes than anyone I've ever known. I remember coming home from vacation freshman year in college to find that Mom's wardrobe had expanded into and taken over every closet in the house and every drawer in my room. If she liked a shirt, she would buy it in every single color. She never went out in public without being put together or having her face on. And she would mention that to other people too, about how they should make sure that they were dressed correctly. Even strangers. It is also possible that our mother was a centipede, because little else would explain how many pairs of shoes she owned. She also loved to accessorize. She had more glasses than Elton John, well, maybe not that many, and a collection of purses, belts, coats, and you name it, that she claimed she needed, but it was never about need. I'll stop here and say that since she died on Wednesday, I've received messages on Facebook, calls and texts, and the theme of all the messages that Mom was a survivor, a fighter, an inspiration for people, and perhaps stronger than anyone had known. Mom was loved, and was constantly reinventing herself. She created a world where she was in charge, and everyone in her world obliged her wants and needs in exchange for her love and wisdom. I was one of those people, and I will carry her strength with me and always remember how she lived and how much she loved. I love you, Mom.
We turn now to Becca and then Jake.
There's no comfortable, sorry, one sec. Don't touch me. There's no comfortable way to start a eulogy. I've been thinking about this day for a while and how uncomfortable it will feel to live in a world where Doris is no longer a part of it. As her youngest granddaughter, I stand before you not only as a family member, but as somebody who truly shared a unique bond with my grandma. Doris's strength was a force of nature, born out of surviving the unimaginable and standing tall, really only 4'11", in the face of adversity. Fierce in her convictions, she carried a flame of determination that burned brightly throughout her life. We all knew her opinions, for she wore them proudly, a testament to her unwavering commitment to truth and justice. Our similarities in using our strong voices became a powerful connection, a shared legacy of resilience. She has instilled in me the importance of speaking up, standing firm, and advocating for what is right. Now, as I continue her mission as an educator, I promise to carry with me not just her story, but also her fiery spirit that defined her character. In honoring her memory, let us not only reflect on the pain of her passing, but celebrate the strength, fierceness, and unapologetic authenticity that defined her. May we be inspired by her boldness, carry her voice forward, and ensure that the lessons she has taught us endure for generations to come. Seeing my grandma in pain has been the hardest chapter in my book. Your strength and fierceness will forever echo in the hearts of those who had the privilege of knowing you. Georgie V's will miss you sending back the bacon because it wasn't crispy enough. Your friends will miss you robbing them of their money in canasta. My dad will miss tech support Sundays. I will miss it all. I am the most grateful to have lived and learned under you. I will never forget our lengthy conversations where we just laid it all out on the table. I'm comforted to know that you are no longer in pain. I will carry you with me every day. I love you always and forever. Back up.
Okay, all right. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Jake Charon. I'm one of Doris Fogel's 8 grandkids. This is something that I've been thinking about every day since I found out that you had cancer. My grandma, Doris, means the world to me. I'm going to start with a few things that reminded me of my grandma, and because everyone that's here too is close to her, hopefully these words mean something to you too. And sorry, Rabbi, some of these words aren't meant for the synagogue. Grandma, Doris, Mom, Holocaust survivor, IU basketball, Card Shark, Georgie V's, and make sure that damn bacon is crispy, gin, Sunday night dinners, Wordle, neighborhood walks, coupons, damn it, candy, lots of candy, presents, grandma toast, shit, birthdays, dessert, friendship, Judaism, and love. Reflecting on these last 18 months since we found out that Doris had cancer has been a roller coaster of emotions. 363 days ago was one of the happiest days of my entire life, and yours too, as you got to watch me ask Maddie to be my wife. What a special day that was for our family, and I'll cherish that forever. Fast forward to today, which is unfortunately one of the saddest days of my entire life, as I have to somehow accept that I'm saying goodbye. I know that you will watch over and guide our entire family through the rest of our lives. I wish you could see everything that I'm going to accomplish and the family that Maddie and I will raise together. The sacrifices that you made with your mom is something that I think about all the time. You thankfully escaped Germany and lived in a horrible situation in China so that you were able to survive. You shared a room with 6 people so that your children and your grandchildren could live the best life imaginable. You and your mother came to this country with nothing, and now they're leaving this world with everything. I told you many, many times, especially at the end of your life, thank you. Thank you for persevering with your mother out of Germany to save yourselves and your future family. I'm not sure if you knew as a kid how many people's lives you would end up changing, but I can confidently say that that number's in the hundreds of thousands. I don't know if I'll ever really be able to comprehend or fully understand why this had to happen to such an amazing and genuine person. But what I do know is that we were all blessed with 89 amazing years of you on this earth. The world and God work in really crazy ways. As I drove home from work on Wednesday with tears in my eyes after I had heard the news that you'd passed, I was so upset that I'd never hear your voice or see you in person again. It was a gross gray day in Denver with full cloud coverage, and as I pulled off the highway and waited at the light, somehow out of nowhere, the sky cleared and the sun shined directly on my face. Somehow you heard me looking for an answer as to why this happened to you and our family. While the sun shined down on my face, the only thing that I could think of was how you had always told me that I was the sunshine in your life. And Grandma, now I know that I have the reassurance that whenever I'm sad or having a bad day, that you'll be the sunshine in my life. Thank you all so much for being here today to support my family and the wonderful life that Doris lived. Someone once told me that when a person passes, they're not truly gone from this earth until the last time that their name is spoken. Grandma, I promise, as well as everyone here today, to tell your funny stories, share your life lessons, and remember your courageous personality, resort to your inspiring strength, and everything in between for the rest of our lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, Rebecca, Jacob, for those powerful memories of a very, very powerful person. We've heard so many wonderful memories of Doris this afternoon. And as I've been listening to Doris's beloved children and grandchildren yesterday and today, I learned that one way of understanding Doris is to see the chapters of her life. So if I have this right, it's okay to, if I miss one, you tell me, okay? But roughly speaking, the chapters would be Berlin, Shanghai, Peoria, Chicago, Fort Wayne, Chicago. And looking through that lens, Doris's long commitment of service to the Fort Wayne Jewish community was an important chapter in her life and to the community that she served as our leader. After Doris's husband Sam retired, she might have considered her own retirement as well. But instead, this was the period when she deepened her involvement with the temple. Doris served as the president of Congregation Achdut V'Shalom from 1990 to 1992, and then again from 2005 to 2007. One could argue that Doris may not have fully appreciated the challenges of the temple presidency when she assumed the role in 1990, but she said yes again in 2005, knowing full well that this was a big job, even for a small-ish congregation. Of course, one doesn't become president of a congregation without first being a member. Doris and Sam raised their children here, and Art, Dan, and Debbie were named, consecrated, bar bat mitzvahed, and confirmed in this sanctuary. Here are Doris's own words from her president's column in November 2005 in our bulletin. Doris wrote, "With Thanksgiving just around the corner, my thoughts turn to the many blessings God has bestowed upon me and the multitude of things that I am very thankful for every day of my life. After having lost my entire family except for my mother during the Holocaust, I now have the most wonderful family anyone could ask for. Our 3 children and their spouses have blessed us with 8 wonderful grandchildren, and I am thankful that they are all living in Chicago within 10 minutes of each other, and I'm able to see them on a regular basis. No telephone grandma here. What a blessing for Sam and me to be able to watch the little ones develop and grow to be a regular part of their lives. I thank God for having blessed me with good health so that I am able to continue with my congregational and federation activities. I'm grateful that I still have the stamina to work and to be an active president of our congregation." That was 18 years ago. And it wasn't only the temple that benefited from Doris's leadership. Doris served as a board member and president of the Jewish Federation of Fort Wayne from 1995 to 2005. And it seems, I heard someone say this, it seems the only way for her to leave the Federation board was to become the executive director, which was a position she held until her retirement in 2013. Jackie Schreier, Doris's successor as ED, talked to me about how helpful Doris was to her. And Jackie said, "Doris and I attended the Jewish Federation General Assemblies and participated on an Israeli mission together. She introduced me to many leaders in the Jewish world who have made differences that have impacted all of our lives. When I became the executive director of the Fort Wayne Federation, having this background and knowledge was extremely valuable. She says, I will forever appreciate the things I learned from her." And there were many stories in this community of people who learned from her in her leadership. Having come to Fort Wayne 7 years after Doris's relocation to the Chicago area, I have not had the opportunity to get to know her as an in-person congregant and community leader. However, I was fortunate enough to become acquainted with her over the last 3 years via Zoom, phone, and on her visits to Fort Wayne. When I began my tenure at the temple, several people told me about Doris and encouraged me, urged me, strongly suggested that I reach out to her. Guess what? Doris beat me to it. Doris called the office and set up a time for us to meet, and 14 days after I became the temple's rabbi, I checked on my calendar, I met Doris. And since it was 2020, that meant meeting via Zoom. After saying hello, Doris's first words to me were, "If you're going to be the rabbi at Achduth V'Shalom, you should know me." There was no question in my mind what she was saying. I understood exactly what she meant, and we had a delightful conversation. I learned the very short version of her life story, and it was evident to me that I was speaking with someone who had great resilience, energy, and determination to make a difference in the world. As I reflect back on this now, It seems to me that to be known and remembered was a raison d'etre, a reason for being for Doris, and not just for her personally. As a Holocaust survivor who told her story to many people in many places, in person and on film, so that the 6 million would not be forgotten, Doris became known and will be remembered. She will be remembered not only as someone who survived the Shoah, as important as that in and of itself is. She will also be remembered as a powerful Jewish woman who rebuked the Nazi regime by raising a wonderful Jewish family and serving and sustaining the Jewish community of Fort Wayne, Indiana. We will remember Doris Fogel. Zecher Tzadik Livracha. May the memory of Doris Fogel be a blessing, a comfort, and an inspiration to us all, now and always. And together, let us say, Amen. I hope you'll excuse me. I'm going to take a moment because I want to get something just right, and I think Doris would have appreciated it. Just a minute. In our Jewish tradition, whenever we engage in the holy task of memory, we have a prayer that we say. We say it on Yom Kippur and at other festivals during the year. And we say it whenever we say goodbye to someone who we have just lost. The prayer is called, of course, El Melei Rachamim. And in a moment, I will chant that for Doris's memory. But let us hear the prayer in English so we know in our kishkas what we're praying. Fully compassionate God on high, to our loved ones who have entered eternity, grant clear and certain rest with you in the lofty heights of the sacred and pure, whose brightness shines like the very glow of heaven. Source of mercy, forever enfold her in the embrace of your wings and secure her soul in eternity. Adonai, she is yours. She will rest in peace. Please rise as you are able.
El Melei Rachamim Shochan Baromi Hamsem Menucha Nechana Al Kanfei HaShechina B'ma'alot Kedoshim U'Torim Kazohar Harachia Mizrachim Et Nishmat Dorit Bat Dina Shalcha Le'omo Ba'avur Shenovu Tzaracha Ba'ad Askarat Nishmata בגן עדן תהא מחצה לך בעל הרחמים. יסתירה בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה. אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה. ונאמר אמן.
The words of Kadisha Tome, Mourner's Kaddish. I believe it's in your booklet. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah. B'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala v'izman kari v'imru amen. Yehi shmei rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lomei maya. Yit barach v'yishtabach v'yit pa'ar v'yit roman v'yit naseh. V'yit hadar v'yit alev v'yit halal shemei dekud shah b'richu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush bechata v'nechemata. Da'amiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlam rabba min shmaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav. Huya aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. You may be seated.
We've come to the conclusion of the service here at Congregation Akduth Shalom. At 3:15 p.m., we will continue with the graveside service at Lindenwood Cemetery. All are welcome. 3:15 p.m. at Lindenwood Cemetery. As we prepare to leave the sanctuary, I ask your help as the casket is moved from the sanctuary. The family will follow, and once the family has left the sanctuary, we'll invite you to make your exit as well. And now please rise as you are able.